morning, dear ladies. Today we will start with the discussion of the poem, starting with the first part of the poem, which is concerned with establishing the setting. The first four stanzas of the poem are sorry, establishing the setting, the place, and the time. A full description of the place and the time. From the very beginning of the poem, we will see that the writer is employing some romantic elements by refuging himself to nature and to the surroundings, to his surroundings of the countryside and especially of the churchyard. And he does not describe these elements of nature quite directly. He uses the sounds and the sights. He uses his senses to in the description of nature. And this sensual description is a very important element in the romantic poetry. The first four stanzas of the elegy are introductory stanzas. They present the setting of the poem. He draws the melancholy atmosphere of death in the poem, and he draws it indirectly in the first three stanzas. He mentions only signs of the countryside which foster the feeling of the approaching death. Now he listens to the bells of the herd of a cattle, using the word knell, as you see in the first stanza. He says the curfew tolls the knell of parting day. The knell is the sound of bells used to inform death or funeral. They are the bells ringing in the church to inform or to announce death or a funeral of somebody. These signs are all sensed by the poet. As we said, it is a sensual description by using senses to foreshadow or anticipate the idea of human mortality. And everything is leading the poet to feel the end, as he is now feeling the end of the day. He says of a parting day, of a day that is ending. And this parting day, all these signs are leaving the world to darkness, to night, and to me. Now he is now, when he says it leaves the world to darkness and to me, it means to me to contemplate this world, to contemplate its ending, to contemplate, of course, this is a suggestion of the idea of death. He moves in stanza 2 to the description of the landscape of nature that lost its glimmer or glamour because silence is overwhelming the universe and everything becomes peaceful. He says that all the air a solemn stillness holds. It means that either the air holds stillness and silence, or the solemn stillness, this melancholy calmness, holds and grasps the air, the atmosphere, he means. When silence is overwhelming the universe and everything becomes peaceful, the calmness of the air and its solemn stillness increases the somber tone, the melancholy tone that started in stanza 1. Then he adds in stanza 2 another mourning owl. The owl's sound as if it is moaning, moaning, moaning. It means what? It means complaining. تنوح. The moping owl does to the moon, complains. It complains to the moon of what? Of her sorrows and pains. In all of these three stanzas, the poet does not refer to death in a direct way. But in the fourth stanza, now he is going to tell the reader that this is the graveyard. He draws the reader's attention to the graves in the country churchyard. Two contrasting images of death are presented. One is the image of the heaps of earth surrounding the grave, beneath the rugged elms that yew tree shade where heaves the turf in many a moldering heap. The image shows how the earth is disrupted and spoiled when digging a grave, because there are heaps surrounding the grave, heaps of sand or of soil. The other image of the cruel forefathers who are buried beneath this disrupted earth while they are seemingly resting in. Although the forefathers are sleeping, yet they are not sleeping. It is suggested that they are resting in peace, but they were cruel. They were cruel forefathers because their graves disrupted the ground. It is important to sum it up, ladies. It is very important to know that the first four stanzas are establishing the setting of the elegy. They also suggest the poet's melancholy as the presence of death makes him contemplate his own death, as far as he is a mortal creature, just like those who are buried in these graves. All the signs he encounters surrounding his landscape are imaging the darkness to the world and to the poet himself. Also, there is a very important point concerning the introductory stanzas is the rising ambiguity intended by the poet by inverting the word order. In stanza 4, when the writer describes the heaps of earth surrounding the graves, he gives a corrupted syntactical or syntax order, because instead of saying where the turf heaves, this is the turf is the subject and heaves is the verb, he makes a shift in the subject turf and introduces the verb heaves. He says heaves turf. Similarly, this is presented in many parts of the poem, not only in the first stanzas, to foreshadow the ambiguity of death itself. So the syntactic disorder reflects what? Reflects the thematic disorder, the ambiguous themes, the thematic ambiguity. Also, this disruption of syntax has been reflected in the fourth stanza through, as far as it is not also, ladies, through the image of the disrupted earth. Yeah. Of the countryside, nor can they enjoy their family lives. The truth of death is overwhelming the proud graves of the rich and the lowly bed of the humble. So there he makes an equation in which he equalizes between the poor people and the humble, the ordinary, the poor people, the rich people and the rich, both of them, whether their graves are proud, showing pride, showing richness. All the lowly bed, the humble graves of the poor, they are equal under in this equation of death. Both of them are overwhelmed by the truth of death. In stanza 7, where the speaker describes plowing and agriculture, he tends to be closer to the romantic elements as he associates man with nature, reconsidering nature as a cause for man's happiness as he has lost in death. That he has lost in death. Ladies, here he makes what? He says, of did the harvest to their sickle yield, their furrow oft the stubborn glebe has broke. How jocund did they drive their team afield, how bowed the woods beneath their sturdy stroke. Now, these works that the farmers used to do, the plowmen, the farmers, working in the in harvesting the seeds they grow, working on the field, all these experiences are very joyful experiences to them. Although these experiences are happy, but they are now overwhelmed by death that deprive them of enjoying these experiences. This stanza is very important for two things. On the thematic layer, it shows that death is overwhelming man. while and at the same time it shows the romantic element when the writer is emphasizing the joy that man can take from nature. Nature is a very overwhelming element in the romantic poetry. Now we are moving from stanzas 8 to 14, and in these stanzas there is a very important consideration for the poet when he is contemplating the lives and the deaths of those poor people. In these stanzas, the poet considers um, uh, these lives and their death, and he warns the reader not to look down at the humble and most dusty graves of the poor people. He challenges the reader that had those humble folk, had those humble and poor people given an equal opportunity of the famous and honored people, they would have become great emperors or waked the living lyre. It means that they had their own imprints, their own influence, their own impacts in this lyre of life. Or would have been great poets or musicians, but their destiny met them obscure, unrecognized people. Okay, the poor were never able to fulfill their political or artistic potential because of poverty. Poverty overwhelmed their lives. They were so attentive to how to get their living, to earn their living, and they did not give themselves. In fact, poverty did not give themselves did not give these poor people the opportunity to enjoy life and to discover their own potentials, their talents. Maybe they had hidden some political or artistic potential, but because of their poverty they were frozen. Their poverty froze the genial of their souls. Okay, so this last line of stanza 13 is very important because it shows how poverty, how the hardships of life caused them to be frozen under its influence, because were unable and uneducated to get enough knowledge that elevates them from their poverty to some good status, or some status that makes them famous and known, just like, for example, poets or artists or politicians like Cromwell or Milton. So now he gives a very beautiful metaphor, or let's say not, yeah, metaphor of the gem and the flowers. In the 14th stanza is very important. Let's read it. He says, "Full many a gem of purest ray serene, the dark unfathomed caves of ocean bear. Full many a flower full many a flower is born to blush unseen, and waste its sweetness on the desert air." Now he compares the talents, the buried, the frozen genials of the poor souls, the frozen talents, the unseen potentials and talents of these poor people, to two objects: the gem, the jewel, which is unseen because it is buried under, it is drowning in the depth of the oceans, and and unseen. The ocean only knows of their presence, of this gem's presence, and the flowers which is grown in the desert. So precious stones and precious flowers, when they are unseen and unknown, they will seem as useless because they are not discovered yet. No one knows about their sweetness, so they are just like a waste. He says, and waste is its sweetness on the desert air. So like gems hidden deep under the ocean, and like desert flowers, they have perished they have been perished without notice. Given opportunities, it means had they been given opportunities, they would have also succeeded. People would have read their deeds in history. Now we can see in this part of the poem that there are certain points which are very important. I mean, to summarize it up, number one, these stanzas invoke the idea of memento mori, a Greek reference to the idea that remember that we all must die, literally a reminder of mortality. So these stanzas, they emphasize the idea of mortality. Number two, the speaker here is using personification when he characterizes death as a man who cannot be flattered by the rich to change his mind. In one of the lines, he says that this death is inevitable, and it is a truth, the truth that overwhelms both the poor and the rich. And the rich cannot flatter him and give him riches or gifts in order to change his mind and not take their lives. So here there is a personification of death. Number three, there are the metaphors of the gem and the flower, as we have already discussed. Thomas Gray compares the obscure, the unrecognized talents of the poor to the pure gems hidden in the ocean or a flower blooming in desert. Both are wasted for being unrecognized and